In this lesson, we're going to look at some more comparison operators. We've already looked at the equality operator, the two equal signs next to each other, and that just tests to make sure that two sides are equal to each other, whether that's to variables, to literal strings, to numbers, whatever the case might be. At that time, I said there's actually some other operators that we can use. But regardless, whenever we're using those operators, like in an if statement or the conditional ternary operator, inside of that parentheses, whatever that is has to still equate to true or false. Okay, and in order for the flow of control to go to different code blocks. All right. So as you can see, I have a new project, CS-ASP_013. And you can do like we've been doing up to this point, copy from the before folder for this lesson into your projects directory so you can be exactly where I am at this moment, or you can go ahead and build it yourself. There's nothing special here. You can use any names for any of these items, a checkbox. Just note that there's a label here. I added a label as well. All right, so meet me inside of the OK button _ click event, and we can get started. So just to kind of recap what we've already talked about, like the result label.text equals first text box.text, second text box.text, and if that is in fact true, then we'll put yes. If not, we'll put no in the result label. Okay. Let's move over here and make a little more room for ourselves. And let's also move into the page load event. This page load event is going to become more important as we continue through this series. In fact, in a couple of lessons, I'm going to focus a little more attention on what this does for us. But for now, we'll just get our feet wet by using that comparison type label text, and we'll use the word equal to, like so. All right. So now with those two lines of code added to the project, let's go ahead and run it. And so if I type 6 in each of these, and it'll say yes. If I type 7, it'll say no. Notice that here's where the label has been, the label's text property has been changed to equal to that we did in the page load event. But our result label will be affected by the value of these two text boxes because of our ternary operator that we used here. All right, so that much makes sense, right? Well, let's move on and talk about other comparison operators. Here are, as you see on screen, a list of the most basic operators, and I think I got most of them. There might be a few additional ones out there that are rarely used. So in addition to the two equal sign together, which says these two items on both sides are equal, there's also a not equal. That's an exclamation mark and an equal sign. Okay, so if it's true that these two items are not equal, then that's a true statement or it's a false statement. And then there's greater than and less than, which operate exactly the way that you would expect them to in mathematical contexts when you're comparing numbers. And then also greater to or equal than, or less than or equal to. So let's go ahead and try some of these and kind of take this same example here. In fact, I'm going to copy the whole thing, and I'm going to test for not equal to. And so we'll change this to not equal to, and then run the application. And so we'll type in 6 and 7 and then click the OK button, and it's yes. Is 6 not equal to 7? Yes. Is 6 not equal to 6? No. 6 is equal to 6. All right. So you can see how you can use the not equal operator to kind of check the opposite, to make sure that these two values are not equal. You might say, well, when would I ever need to do that? Trust me, you will need to do that. Okay, so let's try some other ones as well. We had a whole list there. And let's try and see if it's greater than. All right, and so here we would use the greater than operator, and then let's go. Wait, before we even get to attempt to run it, there is a compilation error. The operator greater than cannot be applied to operands of type string and string. All right, so unfortunately, some of these comparison operators can only be used with numerical values. All right, so we'll just have to skip that idea. All right, but I still want to use this, the greater than, less than. I want to flex them, so we'll just do a little workaround here. We'll only accept numbers. So we'll int.parse whatever the value of the first text box .text is, and then int second equals int.parse. So if there's a will, there's a way, right? .text, and now we'll do result label.text is equal to first greater than second, and then we will go question mark yes or no, like so. And as long as we type numbers into these text boxes, we'll be in good shape. So is 6 greater than 7? I would hope not. Is 7 greater than 7? Still no. Is 8 greater than 7? Yes. Okay. And so, you know, we could basically change this to a whole array of options. Is it less than? And it would work the way we would expect. And then we can do equal to or less than, or equal to or greater than or equal to. Okay, in fact, I got that backwards, I think. That's probably the way it should go. Yes, that's the way it should go. And the reason is because this operator has a completely different meaning than this operator, all right? We will see this operator much later in the series. It's actually pretty important. But for now, just remember it's greater than, equal to, less than, or equal to, okay? So hopefully that all makes sense. All right, well, let's comment these out too and move on. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is actually use this checkbox. And I unfortunately named it something difficult. So here we'll go, result label.text equals, and we know that if we were to do checked, that's going to return a Boolean. And so if it's checked, if it returns true, therefore the first condition will fire off. If it's not checked, it'll be false. And so the second condition will fire off, and it would work the way we would expect it to, you know, as we've seen it up until this point. I'm checked. Yes. I'm not checked. No. Great. All right. So here's what we can do, though. We can actually check the opposite. Whenever you add an exclamation mark in front of anything that's a Boolean, you automatically are checking for the opposite of it. So if the checked checkbox dot checked is not checked, all right, then we will go opposite. Yes. So it would only be true if checked is not checked, if the check property is not checked, because we introduced the exclamation mark, the opposite. So we'll run the application again. And now we switch the no and the yes around. So I am checked, it should be no. It is not checked. Check it, and yes, it is checked. Now the result looks the same, but the way we got to it is kind of backwards, all right? By using an exclamation mark in front of everything, just like we use the exclamation mark in front of the equal sign to check for inequality, we can check for the opposite or the false of the given Boolean, okay? The opposite of the Boolean. All right, let's go ahead and comment that out. All right, and let's talk about logical ands and ors. So you can kind of group things together. So for example, if checkbox checked and first text box dot text equals Bob, and the second text box dot text equals Tabor, then result label dot text equals the perfect trifecta. All right, and let me go ahead and separate these out into different lines so you can kind of see what's going on here. So this is called a logical and it means that we can say this has to be true, and this has to be true, and this has to be true in order for this code block to execute. All right, so a logical and means that every time you add the double ampersands together, it basically says both of those situations have to be true. This has to equal Bob, and this text box has to equal Tabor, and the checkbox has to be checked. All right, now let's go ahead and run it just to make sure that this works. Is Bob, Tabor, and if we deselect it, we need to actually go here with the result label, dot text, and run it again. We had to clear out the value from the previous run. So here we go, Bob and Tabor, and it's checked. Perfect trifecta. If I deselect one or if I change, this, okay, it won't print out anything to screen. Great. So that is the logical and. Let's go ahead and comment all that out. All right, the next one is the logical or. So let's look at this. If checkbox checkbox dot checked or the first text box dot text equals Bob, or the second text box dot text equals Tabor, then the result label dot text should be 1 out of 3 ain't bad. All right. So let's run it. All right, so if I just check the checkbox, I get that message. If I deselect it, none of these are set correctly. If I just set this to Bob, 1 out of 3 ain't bad. Even if I set 2 of them, it'll still work. Even if I set a third one, it'll still work with the same message, okay? So this has to be true, or this has to be true, or this has to be true in order for the block of code to execute, okay? Now you can use them kind of both together, ands and ors, to create a very complex version. And in this case, the precedence matters. So here's what I'm going to do. If checked box checked or first text box dot text equals Bob and second text box dot text equals Tabor, then the result label should equal result label text equals 2 out of 3 ain't bad, like so. And I'll put these on different lines. Now let's see what the result is. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so I check and I get 2 out of 3 ain't bad. All right, so let me do Bob and check it, and nothing happens. Bob, Tabor, and check it, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. If I do this, I still get it. Okay, so basically it's going to say that either both of these have to be considered together or this one has to be considered together. So the ands are, they have precedence over the ors. But you can adjust that by adding parentheses around the ones you want to kind of group together. So either the checkbox checked is checked, or the first text box is Bob, and then in addition to that, always the second text box dot text has to equal Tabor. So let's try that out now that we've taken control of the precedence. So we said Bob, nothing happens. Bob and checked, nothing happens. All right, just checked by itself, nothing happens. Tabor, 283 ain't bad. We got that. How about I deselect that? Nothing. How about if I add that? It works. All right. So either of these and this in order for this to appear. All right. So that is both a logical and an or in the same if statement, and you just have to make sure that you get the order precedence correct using parentheses. Always use parentheses. And that is all I have with regards to comparison operators as well as the logical and or. And we're going to exercise those here in just a moment. So we'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.